without a microphone, so if I can't hear, just raise your hand and let me know, and I'll talk a little bit louder. But again, thanks for this opportunity. The one thing that's really interesting too about being here is that this crime happened barely an hour or so from here. And what's really interesting about this case too is that it could have happened, right down the road, 20 yards from here, frankly, and stuff like that, because the real perpetrators of this crime did not even know that they were in Nebraska, let alone in Murdock, Nebraska. It just really was a random crime as far as just the house that they picked to commit these murders. And it really was a lot of luck, but it was also a lot of good fortune too, as far as how this case was solved. A lot of times the police detectives are responsible for doing some great work. In this case, the person that really is the hero of the case is a civilian, a woman that worked in the state of New York at a jewelry manufacturing company. And I'll get into that here a little bit in the presentation to kind of help you understand how and why that even is the case and stuff like that. But originally, when this case happened, this is what the house would have looked like on the night of the murders. And this happened on an Easter Sunday night of 2006. So coming up almost on 9 years ago. But Wayne and Charmin Stock, very well-liked farmers that everybody knew out in the Murdock, Elmwood, Cass County area. They ran a hay baling business, real small business. Their son Andy helped them run the farm. And then Charmin had a cake baking business that she was really popular. She used to do a lot of graduation cakes, cakes for retirements, birthday parties, and stuff like that. And so they were really well liked and really actively involved in the town and the community. So when the murders happened, everybody was just terrified throughout the region to begin with. But nobody could understand, or at least people that lived out in the countryside, people from around here, even when I lived in Omaha, everybody was aghast and couldn't believe how and why this could happen. And for a lot of people that have been around Nebraska for a while, memories and images. There was no action or anything at all that happened in the kitchen. Okay, but one of my little arrows pointing to the ground there is that ring that you can see that's blown up in my right-hand corner here. Okay, so this ring happens to be found on the kitchen floor of the murder victim's house, and nobody could figure out who and where this ring came from. How and why it was even connected to this murder case, because it's an engraved ring. And it says Corey and Ryan on the ring. So family members are going to be interviewed and asked about this ring. And nobody's going to know who Corey and Ryan is. And the same thing, too, is true with the suspects, Matt Livers and Nick Sampson. So this ring is going to kind of be pushed aside for the time being, thinking that maybe this is a clue with the case, but maybe somehow this clue, or this is not a legitimate clue that's connected to the case. So it's going to kind of get pushed aside for the time being, as the investigators are really intent on trying to get a confession out of Matt Livers. So they're thinking that, as people in criminal justice know, and the professors know this, a confession, and especially getting a confession on videotape, is considered the gold standard. Even though traditionally, real evidence, hard evidence, clues, DNA evidence, really, verifies and corroborates a statement from a witness on a case. The fact is, a confession has always kind of played one of the most important pieces of evidence when you get into the court of law and the criminal justice system. When you have a suspect on videotape, especially admitting guilt of a crime. So a week into the case, the investigators decided to bring Matt Livers back to Plattsmouth. They drove him down there, and they're going to sit down with him for an interview for about over several hours. I think we're talking like 8 or 10 hours or so. And the thing is, this is not going to be in this videotape. because again, I just kind of cut this down to kind of give you guys a snapshot of what was going on here. But for background purposes, Matt denies, I think, over 100 times, and I put this in the book, but he denies over 100 times that he had anything to do with his uncle and aunt's murders. And he's pretty forceful about this, okay? So when you watch this video, think of it the other way around, where the investigators, again, well-intentioned, but you know, basically incompetent, you know, and not thinking things through, are just hell-bent on proving their theory that Matt Livers shows up in the farmhouse just full of rage and venom, and that he's going to go upstairs to the farmhouse. So when you hear Matt denying on tapes that he's involved, pay attention to the tone and the aggressive nature, you know, as far as just how they're, you know, how they respond to him when he's trying to tell them, guys, I had nothing to do with this and stuff like that. So, and just so you know, there's going to be a few bad words in here. That's just the nature of the beast. This is real life. This is the way this was captured and stuff. So I just wanted you to know that too.
And who did it with you? Right? And who did it with you, man? I mean, you almost came out of your mouth. Come on. Man, you know what, man? You want to say it. We know that. You're acting like most people do that commit a crime. Okay? It's in your body. It wants to come out because the goodness in you. Okay? There's goodness in your heart. Like you said, I got a heart of gold. You got goodness in you that wants to come out. But there's that little 5% that's going, okay, now I got to hold on to this because I think I can't come unglued. But man, you're coming unglued. Okay? You're coming unglued at the seams. Okay?
To the murders. Other than, again, that blood that was found in his brother's car, but by this point in time, all the other evidence was pointing toward Fester and Reed. So Susie was able to get the charges dismissed against Nick. Livers is going to sit in jail another 2 months before the prosecutor is going to finally have and he's a good guy, but he's going to have an epiphany and an awakening that false confessions do happen. And once he gets a chance to study the videotape and realize how the interrogation had happened, he's going to realize that that was not a legitimate confession and that Matt Livers was not involved in these murders. So Matt's going to be set free as well. Fester and Reed, the two Wisconsin teenagers I showed you, are going to plead guilty to the murders, and they're going to take their chances in front of Judge Riemeyer. And Judge Riemeyer is going to sentence them both to life sentences as well. So that's going to kind of close at least the criminal investigation of the case. No matter how you cut it, at least the two innocent men are set free in the end. They don't go to prison like the Beatrice 6 people, which is another famous case from Nebraska, but where there was wrongful convictions. The two killers are apprehended and go to prison. So the case gets solved the way it should have been solved. But there's still that big question about the blood that was found inside that car that I showed you before, where and people are finally starting to ask some questions now a year later, back to Dave Kofod, how does this blood get inside of this car? And Dave's going to come up with the story and say that it had to be some type of contamination, unintentionally or inadvertent by one of his own crime lab persons, maybe even himself, but somebody, was careless and got sloppy, and somehow when they were searching the car, they got blood inside of it, when they should never really found blood. And as far as the FBI is concerned, the FBI takes an interest in this case by this point in time. They're going to have some second thoughts about that, and they're going to tell Kofod that his story doesn't pass the smell test. Kofod's going to decide at that point that he needs a criminal defense lawyer, and so he's going to get a lawyer. Long story short is that Kofod's eventually going to go to trial in Plattsmouth. A fellow named Clarence Mock, who's a great attorney out of Oakland, Nebraska, was appointed special prosecutor of this case. And this is all based on circumstantial evidence, but the circumstantial evidence against Dave Kofod was phenomenal. And not only that, the prosecutor was able to prove that Dave Kofod had a pattern of planting blood, and not just this case, but other cases, including the famous case out of Plattsmouth, where a little boy named Brendan Gonzalez was murdered by his own biological father, Ivan Hank, who clearly did commit the murder. But COVID came up with some blood evidence in that case 5 months after the fact that they claimed he found in a dumpster. That just really wasn't biologically possible. But at that point in time, again, because Hank was a psychopath and confessed to the crimes, it got overlooked, and nobody was even thinking about COVID being an evidence.